God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows.
Welcome to the 12th episode of Your Journey Is Not Over. My name is Tanya Pearson Randolph. This is my own personal journey. The expressions and opinions are of my own. I own all the rights to my personal journey, and to your journey is not over. Neither are to be used, copied, edited in any way without my consent. I'm going to get back on track with my personal journey. This period of time is hard to reflect back on because so many things took place that changed my life so drastically. Life was hard, but 1 year, it got a lot harder. The year is 1983, and I was 12 years old, and I was still in the county school, still quiet to myself. I was still surviving on school lunch for the biggest part of the time. My grandma would send food home, and always in a way not to offend my mom, never letting my mom know that I had told my grandma that we had no food. My brother would sneak over to our house and bring me food every so often, when he could get away without being caught, because he lived in another city than where I lived. I spent 99% of my time alone when I wasn't in school or at my grandma's house on weekends, and it got to where when my mom was home, which was rare, all she did was holler and scream and just tear me down. So actually, I got to where I dreaded her being home. For a couple of years, I had for the most part lived alone, so at an early age, I got used to that. I read a lot. It was my way to escape. I watched a lot of TV. We didn't have cable, so I watched a lot of movies that were in black and white. To this day, I still have to end my day with I Love Lucy or Gilligan's Island or anything that's in black and white. I tell people it's a calmer for me, most likely from my childhood. The person who I call my aunt would still come home every so often because she worked and was gone so much. So when she was in town, she would always stay with me, and I loved it. We would do all kinds of fun things, like paint our toenails. She showed me how to curl my hair. Motherly things. Like I said in the beginning, this was 1 year in time that changed so much for me. The first memory I have of that year was I was with my aunt at her dad's house, whom I call Papa, and I was standing at the front screen door. And his dog was a really mean dog, and it lunged toward the screen door. I must have tightened up in fear. The next thing I know, I was bleeding and losing lots of blood fast. Papa carried me quickly to the bathtub, and I remember him being in a panic. I was filling up the bathtub with blood. I do remember him hollering, "Oh Lord, we got to get her to the hospital. She's going to bleed to death." Of course, I'm scared. I have no idea what's going on. Next thing I remember is being at the emergency room. They took me straight in and examined me and got blood in bags hooked up to me. I now know I'd lost a lot of blood, so they were giving me blood. And the doctor needed a signature from my mom, parental consent. There was no time for that when I first got there. So it's late. My aunt tracks down my mom at one of the local bars and tells her what happened and that we were at the hospital and her signature was needed. I remember this like it was yesterday. My aunt told me when she got off the phone with my mom that my mom wasn't very happy. Let me explain. She wasn't worried about me. She wasn't happy because her night out got interrupted. The emergency room is really quiet that night, and I almost bled to death, and I had to lay there with machines and tubes in me, and I had to worry, was I in trouble? I could hear her high heels coming down the hall of the emergency room, and the click of them, I knew she was mad. Immediately when she laid eyes on me, she started hollering and calling me every name you could think of, some I'd never even heard before, and accusing me of getting myself pregnant and having a miscarriage. Immediately, the doctor and a bunch of nurses are in there, and the doctor let her know in a loud tone that no way was I pregnant, because he had examined me. I was still a virgin. I was 12 years old. I barely talked to anyone, let alone a boy. I hadn't even had my first kiss yet. I do remember the doctor telling her to sign the forms and leave the hospital immediately. Security escorted her out. Of course, she smelled like a brewery and was drunk and told me she would take care of me, not in a good way, later on. So I was in trouble for something medically I could not control. I had to stay in the hospital for a couple days, and my aunt stayed with me nonstop. Never seen my mom again after the night in the ER. And when I got released, then it was time for my aunt to go back to work. So I was on my own again. I didn't see my mom for a while after that. Still could smell her perfume and her cigarette smoke every now and then, so I would know she had been at our apartment. Right after the emergency room ordeal was when I finally had built up the courage to tell her about one of the child molesters, only because he still had access to me. I somehow knew that what he was doing was wrong, and I was tired of it. Looking back, it's probably the first time ever in my life that I spoke up about anything, let alone spoke up for myself. I remember I built up the courage, and my mom happened to be at the apartment that morning, and I went into the bathroom, and she said his name and that he would be picking me up after school. I looked at her in the bathroom mirror and I told her no, I don't want to go, and of course proceeded to tell her about the molestation. Not the rape, molestation. Of course, she had a million questions, and I answered all of them. I was scared and I was confused. And she called the person involved, and he admitted it. Thank goodness. Because the constant threat that I had been under, and I understand now, is always used. No one will believe you. I was told those exact words, and also I was threatened that he would kill me. When the abuse started, I was 6 years old. So to be manipulated and told those things over and over again, those words scared me and put fear into me. So that's why it takes so long for victims to speak out. There's control, manipulation, brainwashing, and grooming that sexual abusers use. And to a child, it's so confusing and scary. I also now know that victims are hesitant to speak out or never do. And that makes me sad for people to have to keep that all bottled up. My close friends growing up in high school know that I was very open about being sexually abused. Even then, all those years ago, as I do now, I feel the more survivors that speak out, the more we help other people speak out and heal that trauma. Also, I want to know that yes, we were victims during the acts that took place against us, but speaking up and speaking out made me a survivor. I'm a survivor. I will never allow that to be confused. So he was confronted, admitted it, and went and checked himself into the psych ward for 5 days. Like that was really going to cure his sickness. No way. A couple weeks later, it was late, and I heard my mom's car, which was strange because she never came home on the weekends. We lived in a duplex that had the bedrooms upstairs. So I looked out my window, and I remember my heart dropped. She had the person that had admitted to molesting me with her, and they were drunk and loud. I remember being so scared to the point that I was shaking and feeling like I wanted to throw up. Remember, he did tell me, starting at 6 years old, and many, many times after that he would kill me. And yes, I believed him. And now he's being brought into the same apartment that I'm in. I'm sure I was traumatized. I remember locking my bedroom door and moving my dresser in front of my door. My mom's bedroom was right across the hall from mine, and I could hear them loudly having sex. I was locked in my bedroom and in my closet. After everything my mother had done to me, how could she? I'm a mother of 2 daughters, and there's no way in hell I could be around, see, let alone sleep with someone who had admitted to molesting my daughter. Me telling her about the molestation didn't make her kick into mother mode and protect me. No, in her eyes, as sick as it is, I become competition to her. So looking back, I realize now that night was to show me that this child molester wanted her. By doing what she did that night, she traumatized me all over again. I felt violated in the safety of my own home. Our relationship was never on good standing. I bonded with my grandma and not my mother, and it truly showed. This concludes my podcast for today. Please join me Tuesday. Everyone, make it a great weekend. Until next time, please always remember your journey is not over. God bless.
God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say